I married Annabelle 6 years ago when I was 32 and she was 29. Her family had money, the kind where her parents owned a second home in Scottsdale and her brother Ryan managed some finance thing I never fully understood. Annabelle grew up expecting certain things, and when we met at a mutual friend's barbecue, I think she saw me as a project. I had just started my own consulting business, nothing flashy but stable, and I had inherited my grandfather's property portfolio 3 years before we got married. She liked the idea of being with an entrepreneur, someone building something. But looking back, I realized she always viewed me as beneath her social circle. Her friends were all married to doctors or executives at major firms, and I was just the guy who worked from home and didn't belong to a country club. The first 3 years were fine. We bought a house with a guest house on the property, and Annabelle got really into decorating and hosting dinner parties where she could show off to her friends. She worked part-time at an art gallery her college roommate owned, which was basically her excuse to socialize and network. I was busy growing the business, sometimes working 60-hour weeks, and she started complaining I was boring, that I never wanted to go out, that I was always working. The complaints got more frequent around year 4, right when Harvey entered the picture. Harvey was Annabelle's old college friend, some guy who worked in real estate development and drove a Tesla, and wore expensive watches. He made sure everyone noticed. He moved back to town and suddenly he was at every dinner party, every weekend gathering. Annabelle started mentioning him constantly. Harvey said this. Harvey knows someone who can help with that. Harvey thinks we should invest in this new development project. I didn't like him, but I wasn't going to be the jealous husband who told his wife she couldn't have male friends. That's what she would have wanted anyway, an excuse to call me controlling. Around 18 months ago, someone broke into our guest house. Nothing valuable was stolen, just some outdoor furniture got messed up. But it spooked Annabelle. She insisted we needed security cameras. I had a system installed, cameras covering the main house, the driveway, and yes, the guest house exterior and interior common areas. The security company recommended it since the guest house had its own entrance and was separated from the main house by about 40 yards. I didn't think much about it at the time, just seemed like a reasonable precaution. I started noticing changes in Annabelle about 14 months ago. She was on her phone constantly, smiling at messages she wouldn't show me. She started going to the gym 5 days a week when she'd never been particularly into fitness. New clothes appeared in her closet, expensive stuff she claimed was on sale. She'd volunteer to run errands that took 3 hours when they should have taken 40 minutes. When I asked about her day, her answers got vague. She stopped initiating any physical contact and found excuses whenever I tried. I'm not stupid. I knew something was happening, but I wanted proof before I did anything. And more importantly, I wanted to understand the scope of it. Was this a brief affair or something planned? So I started paying attention. I checked our phone records and saw hundreds of texts to a number I didn't recognize. I looked at our credit card statements and found charges at restaurants and hotels I'd never been to. Annabelle always had explanations. The number was her new gym trainer. The restaurant charges were client lunches for the gallery. The hotel charge was for a work conference her boss reimbursed. Then about 7 months ago, I was checking the security camera footage because the landscaper mentioned someone had been parking in our driveway during the week. I was scrolling through daytime footage from the guest house camera, and that's when I saw it. Annabelle's car pulling up on a Thursday afternoon, her getting out. Harvey's Tesla pulling up 5 minutes later, both of them walking into the guest house. I felt this cold clarity settle over me. Not shock, just confirmation of what I already suspected. I went back through the footage systematically. Every Thursday for the past 3 months, same pattern. 2 p.m., like clockwork. They thought the guest house was private, that no one would know. Annabelle had actually suggested we stop using it for anything. Said it needed deep cleaning and she'd handle scheduling that. It was the perfect setup for her. I didn't confront her. That's the mistake most people make. They blow up immediately and lose their leverage. Instead, I downloaded every single video file. 6 months worth by the time everything came to a head. I backed them up in 3 different places. Then I called my attorney, the one who had handled my grandfather's estate. Here's the thing about Annabelle's entitlement. When we got married, her parents insisted on a prenup. Her father's attorney drew it up, very favorable to their side, protecting her family's money and assets. But my attorney added one clause that her family's lawyer apparently didn't pay much attention to because they assumed I was the greater risk. Article 9C, Infidelity Clause. If either party committed adultery, they forfeited any claim to the other party's assets, businesses, or inheritance. Everything would revert to the original owner. It was meant to protect her family money from me if I cheated, but it worked both ways. My attorney looked at the footage and told me it was airtight evidence. Then he helped me understand exactly how to proceed. We needed to wait until Annabelle made her move, until she filed or threatened to file. If I filed first, her attorneys could claim I was being vindictive, and the footage was obtained illegally or was some kind of setup. But if she came at me threatening to take everything, and then I produced evidence of her adultery, the prenup would protect me completely. I knew it was coming. Annabelle had been getting more distant, more hostile. She started picking fights about everything. I wasn't ambitious enough. I didn't match her lifestyle. Her friends' husbands were all more successful. She wanted to travel more, and I was holding her back. These weren't real complaints. They were justifications she was building for herself. 3 days ago, she finally made her move. I was in my home office when my phone lit up with a text from her. She wasn't even in the house. She'd driven to her sister Lorraine's place an hour away. The message said she wanted a divorce and I needed to accept I was going to lose everything. She'd consulted with an attorney who told her that her contributions to our marriage entitled her to half the business, half the investments, and a significant portion of the inheritance properties. She wrote that I'd been a mediocre husband who got lucky with family money, and her attorney said I'd end up begging on the streets while she lived comfortably off what was rightfully hers. I read the message twice. Then I opened my laptop and composed an email, attaching 12 video files. Each one was labeled with a date and timestamp. Each one showed exactly what had been happening in our guest house every Thursday afternoon for 6 months. I sent it to the email address she used for personal business matters, the one I knew she checked constantly. Then I replied to her text with 5 words. Check your email. Every Thursday, Harvey. My phone started exploding immediately. First were the texts asking what I was talking about, then confusion, then rage. She called me 8 times in 2 minutes. I didn't answer. Then came the messages that made everything worth it. How do you have these? You set me up. This is illegal. You can't use this against me. That money is mine. I waited 30 minutes before responding. Let her panic. Let her scramble. Then I sent one more message explaining Article 9C of our prenup, the infidelity clause her family's attorney had insisted on. I told her that her own father's lawyer had created the exact mechanism that would protect me from her, that every asset, every investment, every property would remain solely mine, that she'd violated the one clause that voided all her claims. Then I did something I'd been planning for months. I sent the same video files to Harvey's fiancée Phoebe. I'd found her social media easily enough. Harvey posted about her constantly. They were supposed to get married in 4 months. She had every right to know who she was about to marry. Annabelle's messages became frantic. She was screaming about how I destroyed her relationship with Harvey, how I had no right to contact Phoebe, how I was vindictive and cruel. But underneath all that rage was panic, because she knew the prenup was enforceable and she knew the videos proved everything. Yesterday morning at 5 a.m., I woke up to 127 new messages on my phone, all from Annabelle. The tone had completely changed. She was staying at Lorraine's house in the basement guest room. Ryan had stopped answering her calls. Her credit cards were maxed out from the shopping spree she'd been going on while planning her exit. Harvey had blocked her number after Phoebe confronted him. The art gallery owner, her college roommate, had asked her not to come in until this got sorted out because Phoebe's family knew the gallery owner's family, and word had spread fast in their social circle. The messages were desperate. She needed money. She needed to talk. She could explain everything. We could fix this. She made a mistake. She never meant for it to go this far. Harvey had pursued her and she'd been vulnerable. She still loved me. We could go to counseling. She'd sign anything I wanted. Then Ryan called me. Actually called. Which shocked me because Ryan barely acknowledged my existence during family gatherings. He was furious, but not at me. At Annabelle. Their parents were apparently mortified because Phoebe's father was someone important in their social circle and this scandal was humiliating them. Ryan wanted to know what my plans were, whether I was going to drag their family through court or if we could handle this quietly. I told Ryan the truth. I wasn't dragging anyone anywhere. Annabelle had threatened me. I'd defended myself with evidence. And now the prenup her father had insisted on would be enforced. Everything stays mine, she gets nothing, and I file for divorce on grounds of adultery. Clean, simple, legal. Ryan actually laughed. Said his sister always thought she was smarter than everyone else and it finally caught up to her. Then he hung up. I haven't responded to any of Annabelle's messages. My attorney sent her a formal notice yesterday afternoon informing her that divorce proceedings would begin immediately, and that based on Article 9C, she has no claim to any marital assets. She has 30 days to remove her personal belongings from the house. This morning, she sent another message saying she has nowhere to go, that Lorraine is charging her rent to stay in the basement, that she can't afford anything without access to our accounts. I thought I'd feel satisfaction. Instead, I just feel this cold validation that I was right about everything. She married me thinking I was her safety net. She cheated, thinking she was smarter than me. She threatened to destroy me thinking I had no recourse. She was wrong on all counts. Update 1. So the comments on my last post were wild. Someone asked if I felt guilty for sending the videos to Phoebe, and the answer is absolutely not. Harvey knew exactly what he was doing, and so did Annabelle. They didn't accidentally fall into my guest house every Thursday for 6 months. But I'm getting ahead of myself because the last 4 days have been absolutely insane, and I need to get this all out. First thing Monday morning, Annabelle showed up at the house. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard her car pull into the driveway. She still had her key and she just walked right in like nothing had happened. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in 3 days, which honestly she probably hadn't based on those 127 messages. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing the same yoga pants and oversized sweater I'd seen her in last week. She started talking immediately. She needed to explain everything. Harvey had pursued her relentlessly, and she'd been lonely because I was always working. She made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything. They'd ended things weeks ago anyway. She just hadn't known how to tell me. The videos made it look worse than it was. She loved me, and we could fix this if I just stopped being vindictive and gave her a chance to make things right. I let her talk for maybe 10 minutes. Just stood there drinking my coffee while she went through what was obviously a rehearsed speech. When she finally stopped, I asked her one question. If they'd ended things weeks ago like she claimed, why had her last visit to the guest house with Harvey been 8 days before she sent me that text threatening to take everything in court? She didn't have an answer for that. Her face went red, and she switched tactics immediately. Started talking about how I'd humiliated her by sending those videos to Phoebe. That was cruel and unnecessary, and proved I was just trying to hurt her. I'd destroyed her relationship and her reputation. And for what? To feel powerful? I told her she destroyed her own relationship by having an affair with an engaged man in our guest house. I told her she destroyed her own reputation by threatening to take everything from me when she was the one violating our prenup. And I told her that Phoebe had every right to know who she was about to marry, just like I had every right to know who I was already married to. That's when she started crying. Not the pretty crying you see in movies. The desperate, ugly crying that comes when someone realizes they're actually screwed. She dropped into one of the kitchen chairs and sobbed that she had nowhere to go. Lorraine was charging her $800 a month to stay in the basement, and she didn't have that kind of money. Her credit cards were all maxed out. She'd been counting on our joint accounts to start her new life, and now she had nothing. Her parents wouldn't even take her calls because they were so embarrassed. I asked her why she thought any of that was my problem. She's the one who cheated. She's the one who threatened me. She's the one who assumed she could take everything I'd built and inherited. Those were her choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences. She looked up at me with this mixture of disbelief and rage, asked if I was really going to let her end up homeless. If I was really that heartless. I reminded her that she'd literally texted me 3 days ago that I'd be begging on the streets and eating from dumpsters. She wanted me destroyed and humiliated. She just didn't expect me to have evidence and a prenup clause that protected me. Then she tried another angle. She wasn't thinking clearly when she sent those messages. She'd been listening to her attorney who told her she had rights. She didn't actually want to take everything from me. She just wanted what was fair. A divorce didn't have to be this ugly. We could split things reasonably and both walk away okay. I told her there was nothing to split. Article 9C was clear. Her adultery voided all her claims. She got nothing except her personal belongings and whatever was solely in her name before we got married. The house, the business, the investments, the inheritance properties, all of it stayed with me. That was the prenup her father's attorney insisted on, and she signed it willingly. She went quiet for a minute, then asked what she was supposed to do. Where was she supposed to go? How was she supposed to live? I told her to ask Harvey. He seemed happy enough to help her every Thursday afternoon for 6 months. Maybe he could help her now. She stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor, started screaming that Harvey wanted nothing to do with her, that Phoebe had called off their wedding and Harvey blamed Annabelle for everything, that he'd told Phoebe the affair was all Annabelle's idea, that she'd seduced him, that he'd tried to end it multiple times but she wouldn't let him, that he was painting himself as the victim, and everyone believed him because his family had more money and more connections than hers. I almost laughed at that, asked if she realized what she was saying, that Harvey threw her under the bus the second things got difficult, that the man she'd been sneaking around with for half a year immediately blamed her for everything to save his own skin, and she thought I was the bad guy in this situation. She went silent again. Then she said something that actually caught me off guard. She told me she was pregnant. I'm not going to lie, for about 5 seconds my brain just stopped. Then logic kicked in. I asked her when she found out. She said 2 weeks ago. I asked if she'd told Harvey. She nodded. I asked what he said. She wouldn't answer. So I asked her directly if Harvey was the father. She hesitated too long before saying no, that it was definitely mine, that we'd been intimate 6 weeks ago and the timing matched. Here's the thing, we hadn't been intimate in almost 3 months. She'd been avoiding me completely, making excuses, saying she was tired or stressed or not feeling well. 6 weeks ago, I'd been in Houston for a consulting project for 10 days. So unless she got pregnant through immaculate conception, she was lying. I told her I knew she was lying. She started backtracking immediately, said maybe she was confused about the timing. Maybe it was longer ago. She just knew she was pregnant and she was scared. I told her to take a test right now, that there were 3 pregnancy tests under the bathroom sink from a year ago when we'd been trying. She refused, said she didn't need to prove anything to me. She knew she was pregnant and that's what mattered. I called my attorney right there in front of her, put him on speakerphone, told him Annabelle was claiming to be pregnant and implying it was mine, asked him what the legal implications were. He said that if she was actually pregnant, we could establish paternity after the birth, but it wouldn't change the prenup enforcement. Her adultery still voided all her claims regardless of pregnancy status. Annabelle snatched my phone and hung up, started yelling that I was disgusting, that I would really force a paternity test on my own child just to punish her, that I was trying to humiliate her even further. I took my phone back and told her that if she was actually pregnant, which I seriously doubted, the child deserved to know who their real father was. And if she wanted to use a pregnancy to manipulate me, she'd better have actual proof. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slammed the front door so hard I heard something rattle in the living room. I watched through the window as she sat in her car for 20 minutes before driving away. 2 hours later, Lorraine texted me, not Annabelle, Lorraine, asked if we could meet to talk about the situation, said Annabelle was falling apart and we needed to figure something out before this got even worse. I was surprised because Lorraine had always been cold to me during family gatherings, acting like I wasn't good enough for their family. But I agreed to meet her the next day at a sandwich shop near her house. Lorraine showed up looking tired and annoyed. She ordered a coffee and we sat in a corner booth. She got straight to the point. Annabelle couldn't stay with her much longer. Her husband Reed was fed up with the drama and the crying and the constant phone calls to attorneys. Their 2 kids were asking questions about why Aunt Annabelle was so sad all the time. Plus, Lorraine worked from home and Annabelle was disrupting everything. I asked why she was telling me this. Lorraine said because I needed to understand that whatever I was trying to accomplish by cutting Annabelle off completely was affecting more people than just her. Their parents were getting pressure from their social circle. Ryan was getting questions at work because apparently Harvey's family knew people in Ryan's firm. The whole family was dealing with fallout from my decision to send those videos to Phoebe. I stopped her right there, told her the fallout was from Annabelle's decision to have an affair, not from my decision to expose it. She violated our marriage and then threatened to destroy me financially. I defended myself with evidence. Everything that happened after was a consequence of her actions, not mine. Lorraine got defensive, said Annabelle made a mistake, but I was being unnecessarily cruel, that I could have handled this privately instead of involving Phoebe and making it a public scandal, that I was wealthy enough to give Annabelle something in the divorce so she could get back on her feet. I asked Lorraine if she'd read the prenup. She admitted she hadn't. So I explained Article 9C to her, the infidelity clause that her father's attorney had insisted on to protect the family assets. The clause that explicitly stated adultery voided all claims. I told her that I wasn't being cruel. I was enforcing the legal agreement Annabelle signed. Lorraine went quiet. Then she asked what Annabelle was supposed to do. Their parents wouldn't take her in because of the embarrassment. Ryan certainly wasn't going to help. She couldn't afford her own place. She had no income because the gallery situation was complicated now. I told Lorraine the same thing I told Annabelle. None of that was my responsibility. Annabelle was a 35-year-old woman who made choices. She needed to deal with the consequences of those choices. If her family wanted to help her, that was their decision. But I wasn't giving her anything beyond what the law required, which was nothing. Lorraine's face hardened. She said I was going to regret this, that Annabelle was talking to a different attorney now, one who specialized in challenging prenups, that there were ways to argue the prenup was signed under duress or wasn't properly executed, that I might think I had all the power, but legal battles could go on for years and cost me more than just giving Annabelle a settlement would. I finished my coffee and stood up, told Lorraine that my attorney was very confident in the prenup's enforceability, that Annabelle could hire whoever she wanted, but the videos proved adultery beyond any doubt, that I'd spent 7 months preparing for this exact scenario, and I wasn't worried about whatever lawyer she found. Then I left. My attorney called me that evening. Annabelle had hired a new lawyer, someone named Marcus Winters, who apparently had a reputation for being aggressive in divorce cases. Winters had already sent over a letter arguing that the security camera footage might be inadmissible and that the prenup's infidelity clause was potentially unenforceable because it was excessively punitive. He was requesting a settlement conference to discuss a reasonable division of assets. My attorney laughed while reading me the letter, said Winters was reaching because he had nothing else. The cameras were legally installed on my property with signs posted. The prenup was drafted by 2 attorneys and signed by both parties. The infidelity clause was mutual and reasonable. But Winters was going to try to drag this out and make it expensive, hoping I'd settle just to avoid the hassle. I told my attorney to reject the settlement conference and proceed with filing. He said that's what he expected me to say, and he'd already started drafting the divorce petition. This morning, Annabelle sent me a text. Just one line. "You're going to destroy me over one mistake." I didn't respond. Because it wasn't one mistake. It was 6 months of calculated deception. It was every Thursday afternoon. It was every lie about where she was and what she was doing. It was threatening to take everything from me when she got caught. She made her choices. Now I'm making mine. Update 2. All right, buckle up. Because this got significantly more complicated. Some of you in the comments predicted Annabelle would fight back hard, and you were absolutely right. I underestimated how dirty this was going to get. So Marcus Winters, Annabelle's new attorney, is not messing around. 2 days after my last update, my attorney received a 60-page discovery request. They want everything. Every financial record, every business document, every property deed, every investment statement going back 8 years. Winters is trying to bury me in paperwork and legal fees. My attorney says this is standard aggressive divorce tactics. Make it so expensive and time-consuming that I'll settle just to make it stop. But here's where things got really interesting. During the initial document review, my attorney found something neither of us had considered. The house, our primary residence, is in both our names. When we bought it 5 years ago, the mortgage company required both of us on the deed for the loan approval. My inheritance properties are solely in my name, protected by the prenup. The business is solely mine, started before we got married. But this house, the one we've been living in, is joint marital property, and the prenup doesn't specifically address the primary residence. My attorney explained this to me while we were sitting in his office going through the documents. The infidelity clause voids Annabelle's claims to my premarital and inherited assets. But anything we acquired together during the marriage, that's potentially divisible regardless of her adultery. The house is worth about $1.2 million now. If a judge decides it's marital property not covered by the prenup, Annabelle could be entitled to her half. I asked him how this was possible when the prenup was supposed to protect everything. He said prenups are specific documents, and this one focused heavily on protecting inherited wealth and business assets. The language about marital property acquired during the marriage was vague. Winters found the loophole. So now Annabelle has leverage. Not much, but enough to make things difficult. She can't touch my business or my inheritance properties or my investments. But she can fight for half the house value. That's $600,000. Suddenly, her aggressive attorney makes sense. Winters probably took her case on contingency because he saw this opening. My attorney asked what I wanted to do. We could fight it and argue that her adultery should disqualify her from any marital property, but that's not guaranteed, and it means months of litigation. Or we could offer a settlement, something less than $600,000, but enough to make her go away. I told him we're fighting it. I'm not giving her a dime more than I legally have to. That same afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Harvey. Said we needed to talk, that we had a mutual problem and maybe we could help each other out. I didn't respond immediately because I wanted to think about what angle he was working. Harvey didn't contact me out of concern or guilt. He wanted something. I finally texted back asking what he wanted to talk about. He suggested meeting at a sports bar near the business district where he worked. I agreed because I was curious what kind of deal he thought he could offer me. Harvey was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth in the back, drinking a beer. He looked stressed. The cocky guy from Annabelle's dinner parties was gone. He stood up when he saw me, tried to shake my hand. I didn't take it, just sat down across from him. He launched into this whole speech about how things got out of hand, how Annabelle had pursued him, and he'd been stupid enough to think it didn't matter because I seemed checked out of the marriage anyway, how he never meant for it to become what it became, how he'd tried to end it multiple times, but Annabelle kept pulling him back in. I let him talk. When he finally stopped, I asked him what he actually wanted. He said Phoebe's family was furious. They'd been planning a huge wedding, over 300 people, and now it was canceled, and everyone in their social circle knew why. Phoebe's father was particularly angry because he'd already put deposits down on venues and catering, and he blamed Harvey for the embarrassment. Harvey's own family was disappointed in him. His mother wasn't speaking to him. His younger sister had uninvited him from her wedding next month, but the real problem was business. Harvey worked in real estate development, and a lot of his connections came through Phoebe's father's network. Those connections were drying up. People weren't returning his calls. Deals he'd been working on for months were suddenly falling through. He was facing serious professional consequences. He wanted me to talk to Phoebe, to tell her that the affair was mostly Annabelle's doing, that Harvey had been manipulated, that he'd tried to do the right thing, but Annabelle had been relentless. He thought if Phoebe heard it from me, she might believe it. And if Phoebe softened, maybe her father would back off and Harvey could salvage his business relationships. I actually laughed at him, told him he was delusional if he thought I was going to help him. He'd been sleeping with my wife for 6 months in my guest house, and now he wanted me to lie to his ex-fiancée so he could save his career? Harvey's expression changed, got harder. He said we could do this the easy way or the difficult way. The easy way was I help him fix things with Phoebe, and he makes sure Annabelle drops the house claim. He still had influence over her. She still contacted him regularly. He could convince her to accept whatever minimal settlement I offered. I asked him what the difficult way was. He said he could testify in the divorce proceedings. He could tell the court that I'd known about the affair for months before I said anything, that I'd deliberately let it continue so I could gather evidence and trap Annabelle, that I'd been calculating and manipulative, setting her up for maximum damage. He could make me look vindictive and cruel to a judge, which might influence how marital property gets divided. I stood up to leave. Harvey grabbed my arm, said he wasn't threatening me. He was trying to find a solution that worked for everyone, that we were both dealing with Annabelle's chaos, and maybe we should work together instead of making things worse for each other. I pulled my arm away and told him if he testified to anything in court, I'd make sure every video of him and Annabelle got shown in that courtroom, that his reputation would be destroyed in detail, that Phoebe's father would see exactly what kind of person his daughter almost married. Harvey let go and I walked out. When I got home, there were 2 cars in my driveway. One was Annabelle's. The other was a Mercedes I didn't recognize. I parked on the street and went inside. Annabelle was sitting in my living room with her parents. I'd met them maybe a dozen times during our marriage, always at formal family gatherings where they'd been polite but distant. Her father, Gerald, was a retired financial executive. Her mother, Patricia, had been a stay-at-home mother who now spent her time on charity boards. They both looked at me like I was something unfortunate they'd stepped in. Gerald started talking immediately, said they'd come to discuss a reasonable resolution to this situation, that their daughter had made mistakes, but I was being excessively punitive, that the prenup was meant to protect both families, not to destroy Annabelle, that they were prepared to negotiate. I asked what they thought there was to negotiate. Gerald said the house. They knew Annabelle had a claim to half its value. They were willing to have her waive that claim in exchange for a lump sum payment of $400,000. They'd even throw in that she'd waive any claim to my future earnings or business growth. Clean break. Everyone moves on. I told them no, that Annabelle violated the prenup and she wasn't getting a settlement from me, that if she wanted to fight for the house in court, she could try, but I wasn't handing her $400,000. Patricia spoke up then, said I was being cruel and short-sighted, that Annabelle was their daughter and they couldn't stand by and watch her be left with nothing. That $400,000 was more than fair considering the house value. That I should think about my own reputation in this. Did I really want to be known as the man who destroyed his wife over a mistake? I asked Patricia if she'd be this understanding if Annabelle had cheated on a wealthy doctor or executive from their social circle, if she'd have shown up at his house asking him to be reasonable. Patricia went quiet. Gerald tried a different approach, said they knew I was a smart businessman. That litigation would cost me $100,000 easily, maybe more if it dragged on. That my time was valuable and being stuck in court for months would hurt my consulting business. That $400,000 was expensive but cheaper than years of legal battles. That I should take the practical route. I told Gerald that I'd already spent 7 months planning for this scenario, that I had the best divorce attorney in the state, that I wasn't afraid of litigation or time or cost, that I'd watched his daughter deceive me for half a year and then threaten to take everything from me, and now he thought I'd just write her a check because it was practical. Annabelle had been quiet through all this, just sitting on the couch looking miserable, but now she spoke up, said I was being vindictive because I wanted to punish her, that this wasn't about money or the prenup. It was about revenge, that I wanted her to suffer. I looked directly at her and told her she was absolutely right, that I did want her to suffer, that she'd made calculated choices for 6 months and then tried to destroy me financially when she got caught. That revenge was exactly what this was, and she'd earned every bit of it. Her father stood up, said this conversation was clearly pointless, that they'd see me in court, that their daughter had rights regardless of what I thought. Patricia grabbed Annabelle's arm and they all headed for the door. As they were leaving, Annabelle turned back, said she really was pregnant, that she'd taken a test and it was positive, that whether I believed her or not didn't matter. There was going to be a child involved in all this. I told her to have her attorney submit medical documentation, that if she was actually pregnant, we'd establish paternity legally, that I wasn't taking her word for anything anymore. They left, and I sat in my empty house thinking about how complicated this had gotten. The house issue was real leverage. Harvey was trying to manipulate the situation from his own angle. Annabelle's parents were applying family pressure. And now there was a pregnancy claim that could complicate everything, even if it wasn't mine. My attorney called that evening. Winters had filed a motion to freeze all marital assets pending resolution of the property division. He was trying to prevent me from selling or transferring anything. The motion included the pregnancy claim, arguing that the court needed to consider support obligations for the unborn child. My attorney said we'd fight the asset freeze, but we needed to be prepared for this to get expensive and messy. That Winters was good at what he did, and he'd found real issues to exploit. That we were still in a strong position because of the prenup and the video evidence, but it wasn't the slam dunk we'd thought it was initially. I asked him what our next move was. He said we file our response to the discovery request. We oppose the asset freeze, and we demand medical proof of pregnancy, including a paternity test after birth. We make them work for every single inch. This morning I got a message from Ryan, Annabelle's brother. Said his parents were talking about covering Annabelle's legal fees to make sure she had the resources to fight properly. That the family had decided they couldn't let her be destroyed without support. That I should expect this to get more aggressive. So that's where things stand. Annabelle has found leverage with the house. Harvey is trying to make deals. Her parents are backing her financially, and there's a pregnancy claim that may or may not be real, but either way complicates everything. The comments on my last post asked if I was prepared for this to get ugly. Yeah, I'm prepared. But ugly doesn't even begin to cover where this is heading. Final update. This is probably going to be my last update because things have finally reached a resolution, though not the way anyone expected. The last week has been absolutely brutal, and I need to get all of this out before I can even start processing what happened. So after my last post, my attorney and I had a serious conversation about strategy. The house leverage was real, and fighting it could take months. Winters was demanding full financial discovery, which meant exposing every detail of my business operations. Annabelle's parents were funding her legal fees, which meant she could drag this out indefinitely. And the pregnancy claim, whether real or not, was complicating everything. My attorney suggested something I hadn't considered. Instead of fighting over the house, we could force a sale. If the house was a marital property and had to be divided, we could petition the court to order it sold and split the proceeds. That way, neither of us got the house, but we also avoided years of litigation over its value. The market was strong. We'd probably get close to asking price, and I could take my half and buy something else. I hated the idea of giving Annabelle $600,000, but my attorney walked me through the math. Litigation would cost at least $150,000. It would take 8 to 12 months minimum. My business would suffer because I'd be stuck in depositions and court appearances. And there was no guarantee a judge would rule the house wasn't marital property. At least with a forced sale, I controlled the timeline and I knew exactly what I'd lose. I told him to file the petition for sale. Winters fought it immediately, claiming Annabelle needed somewhere to live and forcing a sale was punitive. But my attorney argued that Annabelle had voluntarily left the marital home, was currently living with her sister, and had no legal right to prevent a sale of jointly owned property. The judge agreed to hear arguments. While this was happening, Harvey contacted me again, this time through Instagram DM because I'd blocked his number. He was getting desperate. Said his business was falling apart faster than he'd anticipated. That Phoebe's father had apparently told several key developers in the area that Harvey wasn't trustworthy. That projects Harvey had spent years developing were being pulled out from under him. That he was facing serious financial problems. He wanted to meet again. Said he had information about Annabelle that could help my case. That he'd been going through his phone records and messages and found things that would prove she'd been planning this divorce for months. That she'd been calculating about the affair, using him to build a case that I was a neglectful husband. I agreed to meet him, but this time at a parking lot near a gym because I didn't want to sit through another conversation in a restaurant. Harvey showed up looking worse than last time. He pulled out his phone and started showing me messages from Annabelle going back 8 months. Messages where she talked about how much the house was worth. Messages where she complained about my business taking up too much of my time. Messages where she calculated what she'd be entitled to in a divorce. What Harvey didn't realize was that these messages also showed him actively participating in discussions about my assets. Him giving Annabelle advice about property law, him suggesting she document instances of my emotional neglect. He'd basically helped her build a divorce strategy while sleeping with her. I took photos of everything on my phone. Then I told Harvey these messages were great evidence, but they also showed he'd knowingly participated in planning to defraud me. That if I submitted them to the court, he could potentially face legal liability for conspiring to help Annabelle violate the prenup. Harvey went pale, started backtracking immediately, saying he'd just been supportive. He hadn't known about the prenup details. He'd just been listening to her vent. I told him I'd think about whether to use the messages, that I'd let him know. He grabbed my arm again, just like last time, and asked what he had to do to keep me from submitting them. I pulled away and said he needed to testify, that he needed to give a deposition stating that Annabelle had discussed divorce planning with him months before confronting me, that she'd been strategic about the affair and the timeline, that she'd used him. Harvey refused, said that would destroy any remaining chance he had with Phoebe or her family, that he couldn't make himself look worse than he already did. I told him that was his choice, but if he didn't testify voluntarily, I'd subpoena him anyway and submit all the messages. Either way, the truth was coming out. He could control the narrative or I would control it for him. I left him standing in the parking lot and went home. That evening, Annabelle showed up again. She'd gotten past the new locks by coming through the back gate, which I'd forgotten to secure. She was waiting in the backyard when I got home. She looked terrible, like she'd been crying for days. She started talking before I even fully stepped outside. Said her parents had given her an ultimatum. They'd pay for her legal fees through the house settlement, but after that, she was on her own. They were embarrassed by the scandal and frustrated by how much this was costing. Her mother had apparently told her that she'd raised Annabelle better than this, and she needed to accept responsibility for her choices. Lorraine was charging her rent now, $800 a month for the basement room. Reed wanted her out by the end of next month because their kids were getting stressed by the tension. Ryan still wasn't speaking to her. The gallery had officially let her go, citing the awkward social situation with Phoebe's family connections. But the real issue was Harvey. Annabelle said he'd stopped responding to her messages entirely, that she'd found out through a mutual friend that he was telling people the affair was all her idea, that she'd seduced him and manipulated him, that he'd been trying to be a supportive friend and she'd taken advantage of his kindness. He was rewriting the entire narrative to make himself look like a victim, and people were believing him. Harvey's family had money and connections. Annabelle's family had some money but less influence. In their social circle, Harvey's version was becoming the accepted truth. Annabelle was being painted as the villain who destroyed Harvey's engagement and manipulated a lonely husband. She was crying while she told me all this. Said she knew she'd made terrible choices, but she hadn't expected to lose everything. Her family, her friends, her reputation, her income. She'd thought the house money would at least give her a foundation to rebuild. But now, even that was in jeopardy because my forced sale petition would take months, and she needed money now. She asked if we could work something out, if I could give her access to our joint savings account just to get her through the next few months. She'd pay me back from her half of the house sale. She just needed something to live on. I told her no, that the joint accounts were frozen per her attorney's motion, that she couldn't have it both ways, freezing assets when it benefited her and then asking for access when she was desperate. She'd made this adversarial, now she had to live with the consequences. She got angry then, said I was enjoying this, that I was deliberately dragging things out to watch her suffer, that I could end this any time by being reasonable, but I chose cruelty instead. I told her she still didn't get it, that she'd spent 6 months betraying me and then threatened to take everything from me, that she'd told me I'd be eating from dumpsters while she lived comfortably off my inheritance, that every bit of suffering she was experiencing was the direct result of her own choices, that I wasn't being cruel, I was being exactly as ruthless as she'd tried to be. She screamed at me that the pregnancy was real, that she'd gotten confirmation from a doctor, that I was going to be a father whether I wanted to believe her or not, that I'd regret treating her this way when I realized I'd abandoned my own child. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos of Harvey's messages, the ones where they'd discussed my assets and divorce planning, the ones that proved she'd been strategic and calculated. I told her I was submitting these to the court and they'd destroy any sympathy a judge might have for her. Then I told her about the paternity test, that my attorney had already filed a motion requiring genetic testing after the birth, that if the child was mine, I'd meet my legal obligations. But if it wasn't, she'd be exposed as someone who tried to use a fake pregnancy to manipulate the divorce proceedings. Annabelle went quiet, just stared at me. Then she said the baby was Harvey's, that she'd known for weeks but hadn't told anyone because it made everything worse, that Harvey had demanded she get an abortion when she told him, that he'd said he couldn't have a child with her because it would completely destroy any chance of reconciliation with Phoebe, that he'd offered to pay for it but insisted she never tell anyone. She'd refused, told Harvey she was keeping it. That's when he'd completely cut her off and started telling everyone she'd manipulated him. He was trying to distance himself before anyone found out about the pregnancy. I asked her why she'd claimed it was mine. She said because she needed me to give her money, that if I thought I had a legal obligation to support a child, I might be willing to settle rather than drag things out, that she was desperate and didn't know what else to do. I told her to leave my property, that I was submitting Harvey's messages to the court and she could deal with explaining why she'd lied about the pregnancy. She started crying again, but I went inside and locked the door. I watched through the window as she sat in the backyard for 20 minutes before finally leaving through the gate. The court hearing for the house sale happened 3 days ago. My attorney submitted Harvey's messages as evidence of Annabelle's premeditated planning. Winters tried to get them excluded, but the judge allowed them because they were directly relevant to Annabelle's claims. The messages showed clear intent to maximize her divorce settlement, regardless of the prenup terms. The judge ordered the house sold with proceeds split equally, but then he did something I didn't expect. He ruled that Annabelle's demonstrated planning and the false pregnancy claim showed bad faith in the divorce proceedings. He ordered her to pay my attorney fees for having to fight the pregnancy motion. That's about $40,000, so her $600,000 from the house just became $560,000 before her own attorney fees. Winters was furious but couldn't argue the facts. Annabelle had lied about paternity to gain leverage. The judge found that unacceptable. After the hearing, my attorney told me we'd essentially won. The prenup was upheld. All my business assets, investments, and inheritance properties remained solely mine. The house sale was ordered, and Annabelle was facing significant attorney fees that would eat into whatever she got. Harvey reached out yesterday, said he'd heard about the court ruling and the pregnancy revelation, asked if I still needed him to testify. I told him no, that the messages had been enough. He asked if I was going to tell anyone about the baby. I said that wasn't my information to share. What he did with that knowledge was his problem. This morning, Annabelle sent me one final message, said she was moving out of state to stay with an aunt in Colorado, that she couldn't handle being in this city anymore, that everyone knew what had happened and she couldn't rebuild here, that she hoped I was happy. I didn't respond. The house goes on the market next week. My attorney expects it to sell within a month. After that, the divorce will be finalized, and I'll never have to deal with Annabelle again. Someone in the comments on my first post asked if revenge felt satisfying. Honestly, it doesn't feel like anything. It just feels like the logical conclusion to a series of choices she made. She tried to destroy me and failed. She's left with nothing but the consequences of her own actions. Her family has distanced themselves. Her social circle knows what she did. She's pregnant with the child of a man who wants nothing to do with her. She's moving away to start over with whatever money she gets from the house sale, minus legal fees. I didn't destroy her. She destroyed herself. I just refused to go down with her.